achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this edition of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC 153 Silva vs. Bonnar event, which will take place on October 13th, 2012, from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'll be breaking down all 6 main card fights on the broadcast, and then head over to kamikazeoverdrive.net and get all of my preliminary predictions. They are available in their very own section, so please check them out. Now, before we get into my predictions for this event, let's talk about UFC on FX 5. 10 fights I felt very comfortable. I talked about in my bet pack how confident I was going into this event. Of the 10 fights, I got 8 right, including the main event upset, which was a huge upset with Bigfoot Silva taking out Travis Brown. Now, Brown was suffering a knee injury, but my points were well taken, and you can see in my post-fight what I said about that fight. And I don't think I came across a single other reputable MMA predictor, and I use reputable with quotation marks, that predicted Travis Brown to take out, or predicted Antônio Silva to take out Travis Brown. I'm one of the few who actually looked at that fight and didn't just assume Brown was going to win it because of the betting odds and because Travis Brown's amazing. Brown's a good fighter, but there's more to fights than just simply hype. Moving on, my bet pack destroyed it. You can see a couple comments from some of my customers I posted on the website. I nailed 5 different winning parlays, including a 7-fight parlay, which was huge. My confidence picks, a perfect 5 for 5. Value picks, with Eve Edwards off the board, I still hit 3 of 4 value picks. With the lone one I lost, Carlo Prater, split decision. Multiple props came in with winners. My fight-by-fight betting breakdowns, a ton of winning information in those, so consider buying them. $10, kamikazeoverdrive.net in the bet shop. I also gave it a t-shirt from heartandglory.com. I intend to do that again for UFC 153, so even if you don't win, you may very well win a t-shirt based on buying the bet pack. So again, you can certainly check them out. Go over to my website. There's a couple of my from the bet packs that I post, so certainly check those out as well. They're worth looking at. Sign up for my email list where I send out free plays. I also want to see people voting on the poll. My poll question is if, and it's a big if Stephan Bonnar beats Anderson Silva, where does that put him in the 205-pound rankings? Please vote. Let me know where you think he should be. And again, it's not a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical question if he wins, not, oh, can he win? Because I know some people are like, oh, he can't win this fight. Either way, please consider voting. I want to see what people have to say. Check out all of my sponsors. I thank you very much. MMABettingOdds.com, Fear the Fighter, Fighter Style, HeartandGlory.com, CouchFighter.co, MMACrips.com, the Adrenaline Training Center, and every other website that hosts and posts my videos. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it greatly. That's about enough from me. Oh, and one more thing. Pinnacle still doing the draw for a chance to go to Seattle to watch Ben Henderson fight Nate Diaz for the lightweight title. There's a couple banners on my website. You can click on those banners for more details. So please check that out. Also, the prediction panel boys will be posting their predictions for this event, and I think it's about time for me to get into my first prediction. So here we go. Our first prediction of the evening comes in the UFC's welterweight division as Demian Maia, 16-4-0, battles Rick the Horror Story, 14-5-0. Stories coming off a win over Brock Jardine that snapped a 2-fight losing streak. Well, Demian Maia made a successful welterweight debut against Dong Young Kim at UFC 148, but successful. The victory came as a result of an injury Kim had suffered in the early stages, only 47 seconds. So still some questions surrounding Demian Maia's ability here to fight at 170. Now looking at how they win fights, Demian Maia is a BJJ black belt and has a number of submissions in the UFC, most notably over Chael Sonnen. Rick Story is a very powerful wrestler who's been working to improve his stand-up, and he hits very hard. Maia, the way I want to get to this point of this right off the bat, Demian Maia impressed me in his last fight against Dong Young Kim, even though it only went 47 seconds, because it appeared he had got back to his base using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as his main focus. He, has been working on striking, working with Wanderlei Silva, and it was evident in his fights with Chris Weidman and Mark Munoz that he was focused on striking, and that's not something Maia should do. It's fine to be multidimensional, but use your strongest point. And against Dong Young Kim, he took the cage early, he attacked Kim, he locked him up, and he really went to work with his grappling. And Kim's a very solid judo practitioner and is a decent grappler in his own right. And Maia was giving him all sorts of trouble, taking his back, controlling his back, pulling him down, and eventually that led to the TKO stoppage when Kim suffered the injury. Either way, Kim was in a whole pile of trouble, and that's something with Maia's size advantage. He'll have 2 inches of height and an inch of reach on Story here. If he can operate that jiu-jitsu, guys could be in trouble. Rick Story, on the other hand, he hits very hard. He's a very good wrestler, and he averages 3.29 takedowns per fight, but he wants to avoid the takedowns because that puts him right in Demian Maia's wheelhouse. But at the same time, Rick Story's had issues in the past with grappling-based opponents. You look at some of the numbers. Martin Kampmann took him down 3 times. Charlie Brenneman took him down 5 times. Johnny Hendricks 6 times. And even John Hathaway took him down on 4 occasions. So I've seen a trend where Rick Story has trouble when his opponent goes on the offensive looking for takedowns. And when Brenneman got him down, Story had a lot of, Story attacked off his back, but Brenneman was still able to keep him there, passed up his guard, and controlled him, and that's a big problem. Another thing I look at, Rick Story does his best offense against the cage, really ripping the body and attacking in close in the clinch. That's something you don't want to do against Demian Maia, because when Maia can get his hands on you, you are in danger, and Maia is not afraid to pull guard. You saw what he did with that, basically that throw into a triangle choke against Chael Sonnen, and I really think Demian Maia is going to go on the offensive again, look to use that jiu-jitsu and control Rick's Story with it, and eventually take advantage of a mistake by Rick Story. So my prediction is Demian Maia to defeat Rick Story by submission. In the UFC's light heavyweight division, Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis, 9-1-0 with 1 no contest, battles Wagner Prado, 8-0-0 with 1 no contest, and that's that 1 no contest that is the reason we're having this fight, as these two have already stepped inside the cage once, way back at UFC on Fox Shogun vs. Vera, the prelims, with Phil Davis poking Prado in the eye at the minute-and-a-half mark, and it resulting in the no contest as Prado unable to continue. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this prediction. Phil Davis, he's a fantastic wrestler. He's a BJJ blue belt. He's got, he's still developing his MMA game, as was evidence in his fight with Rashad Evans with the striking. 2 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, 4 by decision. If he can get his opponent down, he's a dominant ground fighter when he's on top, as we saw against Tim Boetsch, and we saw against Brian Stan and Alexander Gustafsson, very good. But in his fights against Rashad Evans and Antônio Nogueira, if he can't get him to the ground, or at least initially can't get him to the ground, not nearly as dangerous a fighter. Prado, on the other hand, 7 of his 8 wins have come by knockout. He's also a BJJ blue belt, training out of the Team Nogueira club, so you certainly know he's versed in the ground game, but I think that's going to be his weakness here. In the last fight, Phil Davis stood with him early, and that's what resulted in the eye poke, as Prado clipped him with a left hand, I believe, and had him backing up, and Davis was keeping his hand up to judge the distance, clipped him in the eye, and that was the end of that fight. Davis, and it didn't look good for Davis, even though he was a heavy favorite. Davis needs to resist the urge to stand with this guy. Prado's dangerous. He's a beast of a man, and he has knockout power. Phil Davis needs to shoot, take him down, control him, beat him up. Either way, very interesting to see how this fight plays out, especially now that Prado's in his home country. But either way, I like Phil Davis' wrestling advantage, and I like matched up with the inexperience as far as Prado's concerned with facing American wrestlers. So my prediction is Phil Davis to defeat Wagner Prado by decision. Heading back into the welterweight division, our next prediction will feature John Fitch, 26-4-1 with 1 no contest, battling Erick Silva, 14-2-0 with 1 no contest. Erick Silva comes into this off a win over Charlie Brenneman. He's 2-1 in the UFC with that lone loss by DQ over Carlo Prater, in a fight he actually should have probably been given the win. He should be 3-0 regardless. John Fitch, on the other hand, coming off a defeat against Johnny Hendricks, he was snuffed out by knockout after only 12 seconds at UFC 141, a fight I predicted correctly with Hendricks winning that fight. Prior to that, he had a draw against BJ Penn at UFC 127. Now, Erick Silva comes into this fight with a lot of hype. The guy is being viewed as the next big thing in the UFC's welterweight division, and with good reason. He's got 4 knockouts, and he showed vicious power in his first 2 fights. 8 wins by submission, though, which he debuted against Charlie Brenneman, his grappling skills. He's a BJJ black belt and a judo black belt, and we know how effective judo has been as a counterbalance to an aggressive wrestler, and that's what he has to deal with in this fight. John Fitch, NCAA Division I wrestler out of Purdue. The guy is a grinder by definition. He is the one guy, if you think of grinder in the UFC, you come up with John Fitch's name right off the bat. Not an exciting fighter in the sense he doesn't have a lot of finishes, but he's the type of guy who will break opponents, and that's something we look at Erick Silva. He's faced Charlie Brenneman now. He's faced a wrestler who fights good pace and looks for takedowns, and he succeeded. The fight still didn't go to the first round, so there's still questions of what happens to Erick Silva when he gets into the later stages of a fight. John Fitch will try to exploit that. Now, I saw Erick Silva earlier in his career did face a grappler. The name is eluding me right now, but Silva got the win, but he looked extremely tired in round 3 when he eventually got the stoppage, even though, because he spent a lot of time on his back in that fight. Very interesting matchup. John Fitch coming off that knockout loss. He's been out of the cage for 10 months. That's something to consider. And I think this is a do-or-die fight for Fitch, because his ability to contend in the division will be certainly contested if he drops this bout, or at least his ability to contend in the top 10 of the division, as he will certainly take a slide down. Basically, what it comes down to is, can John Fitch take Erick Silva down and keep him down? Silva will have an extreme advantage on the feet. Fitch coming off that knockout certainly is an issue. We saw what George St. Pierre was able to do against John Fitch in the standing department. Beat him up. Mike Pierce had success bloodying and battering him. And the fight I went back and looked at with Fitch versus BJ Penn, when BJ Penn went after John and took him down was able to control him. Fitch had a whole pile of trouble. First, defending the takedowns and defending the ground game as Penn took his back, had him in trouble a couple times. Fitch did counter out of those situations nicely, but you got to take into consideration, BJ Penn really an oversized lightweight. Erick Silva is a very big welterweight and a talented grappler in his own right, so certainly something Fitch will have to be careful of. One thing Silva did well against Brandao is he used the cage. He got taken down a couple times, but he used the cage to defend those takedowns. Gets his legs spread out well, gets a wide base, and it's very difficult. And Fitch had issues against BJ Penn when BJ Penn attempted the same thing, and I think we'll see the same thing here. One thing Fitch needs to be very careful of when he fights Erick Silva is when he comes in for takedowns, Silva has a brutal knee. We saw it against Carlo Prater. If he lands it, you are going to be in some serious trouble. Silva's a very flashy striker, spinning back kicks and jumping knees. You'll need to be careful to avoid that against Fitch to create openings, but I really see an advantage for Erick Silva in the striking, and I think surprisingly enough, I think Silva has the ability to get the better of Fitch with the ground game. So when it comes right down to it, this is Erick Silva's fight to lose. He's a better fighter, more diverse than John Fitch. Fitch is coming off the long layoff, so I'm going to take Erick Silva to defeat John Fitch by TKO. Our next matchup is in the UFC light heavyweight division. Is 18-2-0 Glover Teixeira battles his fellow Brazilian 18-5-0 Fabio Maldonado in what is going to be a fantastic matchup. Glover Teixeira made a successful UFC debut at UFC 146 on the prelims, dropping Kyle Kingsbury and submitting him via arm triangle choke. Prior to that, he defeated Rico Rodriguez and Marvin Eastman before joining the UFC. Fabio Maldonado, on the other hand, he is 1-2 in the promotion. He's coming off back-to-back losses, both by decision against Igor Prokopets and Kyle Kingsbury, both fights that you could arguably have seen for the Brazilian based on his striking output, and that's a big deal in this fight. Look at Glover Teixeira. Of his 18 wins, 11 have come by knockout. Fabio Maldonado, similar numbers, 18 wins, 12 by knockout. Teixeira only had a minute 53 in his debut, but statistically, it's a small. It's too small to actually take a legitimate stance on the stats, but still it's very interesting to note 7.96 strikes landed per minute in his debut, which is very, very impressive. Fabio Maldonado, on the other hand, has had 3 UFC fights, and he lands 6.5 strikes per minute, so he's a high output guy too. He has very good boxing, good combinations, not the greatest one-punch knockout power in the world, but very good combinations, constantly attacking his opponent, and he has brutal body shots. You saw against Igor Prokopets, you saw against Kyle Kingsbury what he can do when he attacks and targets the body, and it's very, it's something difficult that a lot of opponents aren't used to dealing with, especially if he can get you back against the cage and start landing at will. Another big number, statistically speaking, with Maldonado is his strikes absorbed per minute, which is 4.41 in 3 fights. That means his opponent has a lot of success landing strikes, and that's a huge issue. Maldonado is a very confident boxer, but his striking defense is questionable. And it seems like he has an excellent chin, and that's a problem. We did see Prokopets hurt him a couple times, but he has an excellent chin and the ability to take punishment. But something in the UFC you don't want to do is take prolonged punishment in matchups, because it eventually will catch up with you. And I think that's part of the reason he lost those fights, is because he was allowed his opponents to still tee off on him and land with regularity, and that takes away from your output. If you're averaging 6.5 strikes per minute and only getting tagged like 2.5, that's big. But when you're getting hit almost 5 times, it takes away from the fact that you can land so many shots. And that's an issue here. Glover Teixeira is a very dangerous striker, big power. We saw what he did against Kyle Kingsbury. He has knockout power in his hands. He can hurt guys. I saw what he did against Marvin Eastman. He put him down. He's a very aggressive striker. He has a tendency to get a little wild, so he'll need to be careful to avoid creating openings for Maldonado to counter. But Igor Prokopets had a lot of success against Maldonado, hurting him several times. And even, Kyle Kingsbury did it, had some, was able to land with some regularity, as I said, and did some damage to Maldonado. And again, Maldonado's conditioning, if this fight goes later, which actually I don't expect it to, but if this fight goes into later rounds, his conditioning is a little bit questionable, as he's not the most physically impressive specimen, and as far as I'm concerned, that's an area he needs to clean up. Either way, I really like what Glover Teixeira does with his hands. He's just as dangerous a striker, and he hits hard. We saw what he did against Kingsbury, just throwing against the big man, and put him on his backside and eventually finished him. And one knock on Fabio Maldonado is his ground game. He is a BJJ brown belt, but over his career, he has been submitted twice, and against Kyle Kingsbury and against Prokopets, we saw when he went to the ground, there were issues there. Both guys took advantage of those situations, and I think that's something that Glover Teixeira could certainly work on. He tapped out Kyle Kingsbury, which was impressive. He has a win over Antonio Mendez, also by rear naked choke in early 2011, and 5 of his wins have come by submission. Look for early striking exchanges, but I have a feeling that when Maldonado gets hurt, we're going to see Teixeira take an opportunity to take him to the ground or fall him to the ground on a knockdown. So my prediction is Glover Teixeira to defeat Fabio Maldonado by submission. In our co-main event of the evening, Minotauro Nogueira, 33-7-1 with one no contest, returns home to battle Dave P. Herman, 21-4-0 in the heavyweight division. Nogueira coming off that brutal Kimura arm-breaking submission defeat at UFC 140 against Frank Mir. On the other hand, Dave Herman has dropped back-to-back fights by knockout against Roy Nelson and Stephan Struve since debuting in the UFC with a loss. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind in this fight is that both guys are stepping up on short notice, so it'll be interesting to see how they are prepared physically for this matchup. Now, one thing with Herman, he made the statement that BJJ does not work in MMA. Well, Nogueira would like to prove him otherwise. He's a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he has 20 of his wins by submission, so certainly he's proving that it does. Dave Herman, on the other hand, his big number, 15 wins by knockout, but he's also been stopped 3 times now in his career. He has 5 wins by submission, which is impressive in itself, but certainly an interesting matchup. Nogueira, the big knock on him is his age. He's 36 years of age, and he has been through wars. He fought through Pride, and that was, that can definitely speed up the physical wear and tear on your body, and that's something we'll see how he fares and deals with in this fight. Physically, these guys are fairly similar in height and weight. Herman 6'4", Nogueira 6'3", both weighing in around the 240 mark, and both have a 77-inch reach. Statistically, Herman big advantage in the strikes landed per minute, 6.04 strikes per minute, compared to Nogueira at 1.85. Nogueira, very good boxer, very good hands, doesn't have a lot of knockout power, only 3 wins by knockout, but he showed against Mir when he hurt him, and he, of course, stopping Brendan Schaub, he is capable of doing damage on the feet. Dave Herman, as I said, 61% accuracy rate, which is impressive with his strikes. Now, he does get hit almost 4.5 times per minute, which also is a concern, but the guy's been impressive, and you look at what he did in his, despite his 2 losses, he hasn't looked that horrendous in the UFC. Against Stephan Struve, he won the opening round. He was really taking to Struve, throwing some nice kicks, combinations, getting inside. He has some very nice combinations with his hands, throwing an uppercut right-hand combo, a low-kick right-hand combo. He sets things up well, and it wasn't until Struve tagged him in the second round to put him down. And we've seen what Stephan Struve's capable of. We saw what he did against Miocic, losing that opening round and coming back to, again, stop his opponent in that fight. Against Roy Nelson, again, the fight only lasted 51 seconds, but again, he was starting off very strong, throwing some kicks, fighting very tall and long, keeping it range until Nelson got in and landed that big right hand. And again, in any situation in the heavyweight division, if a big man puts a shot on your chin, most likely you're going out or you're going to be in some serious trouble. Now, Nogueira, a couple things I'm looking at here is, his boxing is very, so let's talk first. If he gets this fight to the ground, this is his fight to win. He's a submission master, and I think, Herman did a nice job against John Olivinamo defending, getting up from the takedowns and getting out of the ground game. But against Nogueira, I think if the fight goes to the ground, Herman will be in serious trouble. But on the feet, you have to wonder about a couple things with Nogueira. He's been out of action for, 11 months? 10 months? So that's a big issue. He's coming off that brutal breaking of his right hand, which is his power hand when he's striking. So you have to wonder, not his right arm. You have to wonder will that affect his power? Will that affect his combinations, his smoothness? And he didn't have surgery. He rehabbed it. So again, he's 36 years of age. You don't recover like when you're 25. So that's a big issue coming into this fight. Additionally, he is a good boxer, but his striking is very limited to boxing. He doesn't use a lot of kicks, and that's something that Herman does well. He uses a lot of kicks. He mixes things up with combinations, and he fights long, where Nogueira needs to get in a little bit closer. And we saw against Schaub, he was getting tagged on the outside. It wasn't until he got Schaub back against the cage and started unloading that he found success in that fight. And Nogueira, Herman has been knocked out 3 times. Nogueira, on the other hand, he's been stopped twice, and we saw what he had trouble against Cain Velasquez's hand speed. He had trouble against Frank Mir's hand speed in the first matchup. Even against Tim Sylvia, who threw shots right down the middle of straight strikes, right through his guard. That's where the issues came up, and I think Herman has the ability to do that. I really like Herman's speed advantage here against Nogueira. I think that shows up huge. I like his kicking diversity, the way he used knees and other kicks to keep Nogueira at distance and stay out of range of his hands. And, on one side you have a fighter who's going to use everything, all of his weapons. On the other side you have a guy who mainly uses his hands. Again, Nogueira's takedown ability, not the greatest in the world. If he can get this fight to the ground, he certainly has the ability, but his accuracy, 33%. For takedowns is not something that you want to be relying on in this fight. I know Nogueira will be bolstered by his home crowd, and that's something to take into consideration, but I think his age, the injuries, the layoff, all of these things catch up to him here. A lot of people are probably going to get after me for taking this pick, but I think Dave Herman is the more well-rounded fighter, and I think this is a huge opportunity for Herman. He wouldn't have taken this fight if he didn't see an opportunity, and I think he gets the better of Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, so my prediction is Dave Herman to defeat Minotauro Nogueira by TKO. Now it's time for our main event prediction in the UFC's light heavyweight division, a fight a lot of people are calling a ridiculous mismatch. But either way, we've got Anderson the Spider Silva, the UFC middleweight champion, stepping up a division with a record of 34-0, battling Ultimate Fighter finalist, one of the original men to really lead the UFC into its new era, the American Psycho Stephan Bonnar, 17-7-0, who basically was retired up until it was decided he had an opportunity to step up and take this fight against Anderson Silva, again, saving this card and making it interesting. But the odds heavily stacked against the American Psychos. Many people feel Anderson Silva is going to walk away with this bout, and let's get to my prediction. Let's see what I think. Now, looking at Anderson Silva, we know what the guy is all about. 32 wins, 19 by knockout, 6 by submission, 7 more by submission. The guy is a well-rounded fighter, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black belt in Judo, a black belt in Taekwondo. The guy is dominant, and he's fought some of the best in the world, defeating Chael Sonnen twice, Yushin Okami, Vitor Belfort, Demian Maia, Forrest Griffin, the guy, Dan Henderson, the list goes on, Rich Franklin, Nate Marquardt. The guy's beat them all. Very, very impressive, what Anderson Silva's done. I don't need to go into his accolades any further than that because we know what he's capable of. Stephan Bonnar, on the other hand, I think is an underrated fighter. He comes into this, he too, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black belt in Taekwondo, just tough as nails. 3 wins by knockout. He has been stopped twice, both by TKO. They were due to cuts, not actual being knocked out. 7 wins by submission. He has wins over Kyle Kingsbury, Igor Prokhyets, Krzysztof Solshinski. He's been in there with guys like John Jones, Forrest Griffin, Rashad Evans. He actually fought Forrest twice. Keith Jardine. He has a win over. He fought Lyoto Machida early in his career. He lost a Jungle Fight 1 via cuts to Machida there. So the guy has faced top-level talent, has never been officially knocked out. He's done well despite not winning those fights. He still had a good showing. Now, the first thing people want to look at in this matchup is the size. Yes, Anderson Silva's fought at light heavyweight before, twice, defeating James Irvin and Forrest Griffin both inside the first round. But Stephan Bonnar is a very big light heavyweight. Silva comes in at 6'2", Bonnar 6'4". Bonner's going to have a slight 1.5-inch reach advantage, but generally speaking, Bonnar is going to be the physically larger man. When he fought John Jones early in his career, he and John Jones very similar in size. Yes, it was a young John Jones, but either way, Bonnar did not look undersized in that matchup. And that's one thing that's a big question mark, is how is the 37-year-old Anderson Silva going to deal with a very big opponent pressed against him? Now, when I was looking at this fight, I thought to myself, how does Stephan Bonnar win this fight and pull off the ultimate upset, potentially in the history of the UFC? And I look and I say, Bonnar needs to brawl the boxer. He needs to get inside. He needs to attack Anderson Silva, use his hands in close, push him into the cage, beat him up, use knees, and eventually take this fight to the ground and keep on top of him. Keep in mind, this is only a 3-round fight, not 5-round like a main event normally because it was signed late. It's only 3 rounds, so Bonnar just needs to take 2 of 3 rounds. And if he can do it early against Silva, he's very, very capable of doing it. We saw what Bonnar did against Kyle Kingsbury. He took him down, he laid on top of him, he controlled him, and he did a nice job there. Against Prokhyets, a similar game plan. Bonnar is the American Psycho. He's the type of guy who fights better after he gets hit, when he gets bloodied up, when he gets going. And that's the type of fight he needs to make this. He needs to turn this into a brawl and remove all technique. Use his size and physical strength against Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, on the other hand, if he fights at distance, that's going to be a huge issue for Stephan Bonnar. He has, Silva, fantastic head movement, matrix-style ability to avoid shots. He has excellent strikes. He's very good on the ground, submission-wise. We saw him tap out tap out to Dan Henderson and Nate Marquardt, and of course Chael Sonnen. The guy is a dangerous, dangerous fighter. But again, the question is the size going to play a role? Can Anderson Silva deal with Stephan Bonnar's pressure and the fact that he's going to get right in his face? And I think Bonnar, of the 3 guys that Silva's faced at light heavyweight, and James Irvin and Forrest Griffin, now Bonnar, Stephan Bonnar is a huge threat to him. But is he enough to win this fight? I don't think so. In Stephan Bonnar's fights, yes, he is a dangerous guy, and he's never been knocked out, but I have seen him take some serious damage. Against Solshinski and against Igor Prokhyets, he was getting backed up and he was getting hurt. Against John Jones, he had a lot of trouble in the clinch. John Jones did some serious damage, and we all know Anderson Silva is capable of. Yes, Anderson Silva is not as big as John Jones, but that was a very young John Jones. That was almost 4 years ago that fight took place. So it's, we know what Bonnar, what he has to do, and that's one thing I talked about. He needs to fight him in the clinch. Anderson Silva is not the type of guy you want to fight in the clinch. That's where Bonnar's at his best, but you do not want to get in close. Anderson Silva showed against Yushin Okami how tough he is to handle in tight. Against Rich Franklin, he decimated him with the Muay Thai knees from the plum. It's something, again, you do not, Bonnar, it's the path to victory for Stephan Bonnar, the most likely path to victory, but still, again, you're going right into the frying pan, right into the fire in that situation. You're having to deal with Anderson Silva in tight. Again, Bonnar's never been stopped, but I saw several times against, especially against Krzysztof Solshinski in that second fight, where he was backpedaling and getting tagged and getting hurt in the exchanges, and that's something that Anderson Silva, if he starts landing on you, as you're going to be in some serious trouble. Either way, I know a lot of people are writing off Stephan Bonnar. I think that's a mistake. I really think he's going to push Silva. He has nice kicks, and if he does decide to fight at distance, he has a decent arsenal of spinning back kicks and other attempts that strikes that you see with a Taekwondo-based fighter that he will attempt. But I just think Anderson Silva's too talented a fighter, and there's just too many. I think Bonnar, I commend him for stepping up in this situation, taking this fight, but I just don't see him being able to pull it off. Based on most scenarios. I'm not saying he can't pull it off. I just see there's too many scenarios favoring Anderson Silva, the clinch work, the capabilities on the ground, and the striking. Bonnar, when I start looking at predictions, I start narrowing things down and saying, well, in order for Stephan Bonnar to win, he has to clinch, he has to bloody him up and brawl him, and he has to take him down. That's a very narrow path. When making a prediction for a fighter to win by it's a possibility, but it's certainly not a highly possibility. When I do predictions, I like to be able to say, okay, this guy's striking is better, his cardio is better, his ground game is okay, but his takedown defense is excellent. Those are pretty broad generalizations for a reason to pick a fight, and that's what I like to have is these wide scaping advantages a fighter has, not just single solitary ways he can win a fight by brawling and scoring takedowns and laying on top. Either way, I know this is a long prediction to get to what many people are feeling is the inevitable. I still think Stephan Bonnar will give him a good fight. It might go beyond a round. You'd be shocked. You'll never know. But when it comes right down to it, Anderson Silva will land with regularity, will hurt Stephan Bonnar, and I expect to see Bonnar eventually dropped, just from taking too much damage. And I'm going to take Anderson Silva to defeat Stephan Bonnar by TKO. So those are my predictions for the 6 main card fights at UFC 153, Silva versus Bonnar. For the rest of my predictions, all the preliminary matchups, head over to KamikazeOverdrive.net and check out the preliminary section for UFC 153. Also, the prediction panel, all 3 members of the panel will be breaking down these fights and giving their predictions, so please check them out. Bet packs will be available at KamikazeOverdrive.net for $10. I've been on fire of late, so please consider investing. Lots of great information and a lot of cash to be handed out. If I hope to continue my winning ways. I can't guarantee anything, but certainly the things have been looking up lately, and I've been putting a lot of money in people's pockets. You get my individual fight breakdowns for each based on betting odds, and I'll tell you where the best place to make money, give all my confidence picks. But it should be a fantastic night of fights and a great opportunity to make some serious cash. Thank you very much for tuning in as always and listening and commenting. And the next event is a Strikeforce event, but also the World Series of Fighting will be going down that evening, and I hope to be breaking down that show as well. No promises, but I'll do my best. So thank you very much. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.